main pundits who are following the fight in America, the main respected boxing pundits, are leaning towards Serrano. Now, there's a hometown thing going on with Serrano. Obviously, she's from Puerto Rico, but she's very much New York raised, and they obviously know her more than they know Katie Taylor. But I also do think it is conventional wisdom that, the younger fighter in Serrano and the more powerful fighter and the fresher fighter, and possibly they think maybe a fighter that suits an opponent like Katie Taylor is going to win. The only thing I'll say is I find it very difficult. It took me years to build up to the fact that there's an Irish sports person of any kind who might just very well be the best in the business at what they do, and an undisputed best in some ways. And every time Katie came up against an opponent you think might be in trouble, you go, "Oh, I'm not sure." I'm not, like, maybe this is the one. Maybe she's found out's the wrong word, but you have this awful Irishness in the back of your head, and it's like now that it's coming to it that people are, genuinely thinking this might be the case. There's a part of me that thinks, you know what, damn it, I believe in Katie Taylor. She's brought it for all these years, and we're not talking the 6 years of professionalism. We're talking the 12 or so years of our journey with her. Through the amateurs and professionals, and one time it didn't go well. It's not very much.
No, it sure isn't.
Can she drag it out of this is the only fight that matters. I spoke to Katie Taylor, I think it was 4 years ago, and she was talking to me about how the Serrano fight was around the corner, and she wasn't saying everything else doesn't matter, but it was very, very obvious that Amanda Serrano was the biggest fight out there, and it was the one that she wanted, and she was relishing it. A lot of time has passed since then. A lot of things may have changed, in terms of maybe Katie's legs, etc. But I don't know. I just can't write her off. She's been too good for too long.
Steve Bunce was writing about this, and he was saying, I think it was on the BBC website, I was just reading it, he was saying with Taylor, and some of the points he makes here I haven't heard said about her, like she lacks desire or her mind's elsewhere now, but we'll accept them anyway if some people think that. So Steve Bunce is saying, the sense is Taylor's slowing down, showing a lack of desire, she's easier to hit, people think her mind's elsewhere, and all of those things, says Steve Bunce, are probably true, but they're not terminal. I think she's fought well within herself in the last few fights. She's coasted in some of them. Has she looked like the Taylor of old? She hasn't, but she hasn't had to be the Taylor of old. And so I'm thinking, man, this is fairly grim. And then he just says out of nowhere, whisper it, I think we might see something extraordinary from Taylor. She rises to the occasion. Bunce in at the end.
Yeah. Maybe she's got to the point where she beats what's in front of her, and that's a very normal thing, I think, for a sports person. I think everything we know about Katie Taylor would suggest that lack of desire is at the very least worded wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that Katie Taylor has a lack of desire. And if any of the other aspects of that comment is true, then Amanda Serrano in a full Madison Square Garden, a female world title fight topping the bill, them appearing on the bloody Today Show on NBC today as they get built up to this. This is how big this is. It's bloody bigger in America than it is here in some ways. That's going to immediately erase all of those little issues. I don't think she's going to have a problem getting up for this fight.
No, and not that it's the most important thing by distance, but she now sails off into the sunset, set for life, you would think, financially, and has a global profile. And I don't know, Rich, what you thought when she turned professional in 2016. I must say I had real worries, because I just thought this is a hard-nosed business. Interest levels in women's boxing were very, very poor at a professional level. Would there be money? Would the whole thing quickly chew her up, spit her out? And I thought, well, maybe just, bide your time, go to Tokyo, win gold, and what a fitting finale that would be. But whatever way her and Eddie Hearn struck up this partnership, it's just blossomed to an extent I could never have seen within 6 years. I mean, if you'd said 6 years ago, Madison Square Garden, 20,000 on the Today Show, on NBC, etc., I would have said, no, it won't happen that quickly. Can't.
Yeah, and it's not just the Today Show. It's a media blitz that her and Serrano have been engaged in over the past 24 hours or so in New York. And this week is absolute vindication for pretty much every single thing that she has done so far, not only in her professional career, but also in her boxing career, her sporting career as a whole. Because to get from where she started having to pretend to be a boy in her local boxing club out in Bray to headlining Madison Square Garden, 20,000 fans, a big DAZN contract, the biggest contract that a women's fight has ever seen in terms of purses and paydays. Like, it's absolutely incredible. And she's done it the right way. Like, every single thing about her has been conducted within the realm of the ring. There's been no smack talk. There's been no, drunk driving arrests. There's been no, cases of her taking to social media at 3 o'clock in the morning and cursing somebody out. She's an impeccable sports star. She's an impeccable human being. And for her to be performing on a stage as grand as MSG in front of 20,000 in the biggest women's fight of all time, like, she deserves every single plaudit that will come her way in the wake of this fight, whether she wins it or loses it.
Quite a respectful air between the two fighters. Serrano, this was a couple of weeks ago, but it hasn't really changed in the meantime, was saying that when Taylor turned pro, I was so excited because I knew she would change things for us, which gives an insight into even the esteem that someone like Serrano, with 40 wins at that stage, held Taylor in. I'm sure she's even a bit surprised at the payday, which is landing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But also, the fact that Serrano sees Taylor that way, it does illustrate how much of a pioneer Katie has been for women's boxing, but it's also something that she takes quite seriously. So, she's ended up at Madison Square Garden for this massive fight, but I also think that, she wanted to fight Amanda Serrano because that was the fight out there that was going to do this. So great, that's a payday. Great, it's a personal accolade. But it's also something that's women's boxing is on the map for. And we've all talked to Katie over the years in different ways, and this stuff is very important to her. She wants to put women's boxing to the fore, and when she does step off the stage, whenever that might be, it could be a few years from now for all we know, but she's left it in a place now to where it's not going to be ever a question again of, it's I don't care who it is. You can't have women in Madison Square Garden, etc., etc. Whatever the case, whatever the old ways used to be, the old ways of thinking, it's gone. And she's broke the glass ceiling there. And like as Richie says, win, lose or draw, we'll never forget about. She'll have amazing accolades, but. Do you know what? It's the Wednesday before the fight. Forget about the win, lose or draw stuff. It's whether she's going to win is still the most important part of this,
The Newsround is brought to you with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Richie, you've got team news.
Yeah, after the excitement of the Etihad last night, it's the turn of Liverpool and Villarreal tonight in the Champions League semi-finals. The Spanish side hoping to reach the final of European football's premier competition for the first time. For Liverpool, this is their third semi-final in just the last 5 seasons. 3 changes for Liverpool from that Merseyside derby win over Everton at the weekend. In goal, it's of course Alisson. Across the back four, it's Trent Alexander-Arnold. Ibrahima Konate, who replaces Joel Matip, is alongside Virgil van Dijk, and at left back it's Andy Robertson. In midfield then we've got Fabinho with Jordan Henderson coming into the side in place from Naby Keita. Thiago Alcantara keeps his place on the left hand side of that midfield, and then in the attack it's Mo Salah, Sadio Mane, and in for Diogo Jota comes Luis Diaz. For Villarreal, a 4-4-2 for them tonight. Geronimo Rulli starts in goal. A back four of Juan Foyt, Raul Albiol, Pau Torres and Pervis Estepinian. Samu Chukwueze, Danny Parejo, Etienne Capoue and Francis Coquelin are across their midfield, with Giovanni Lo Celso in support of Arnaud Danjuma. Kickoff at Anfield is at 8. No Gerard Moreno for Villarreal tonight. He missed their game at the weekend in La Liga and once again is out injured this evening.
Do wonder if the memorable sight of Matip sprinting after Anthony Gordon not so long ago played in the minds of Jurgen Klopp, and he's picking this team. Certainly that midfield of Henderson, Fabinho, Thiago is very much emerging as their go-to midfield, and I would think Jota must be thinking to himself, like, Firmino was tough enough to try and see off. Firmino's injured this evening. Where's this guy come from?
It's absolutely incredible. Jota comes in, breaks that front three, does nothing except score in every single game. Yeah. Just goes in. Oh yeah, no, I'll be just as good as you two here. Firmino, you step to the side, buddy. Jota scores in every single game. It's like, we just got this guy. We're thinking the future. We're thinking the future. We'll just give him a run or two. He'll play a couple of games. The less important ones, and then suddenly he has this superstar. Yeah. And Jota's on the bench. Oh my God. What a killer.
We're atop this game. Gav Cooney's going to pop in the studio as well, so Football Show, we're right across it, and we will of course be reflecting on Man City 4, Real Madrid 3. There are many reasons and reminders, Mick, and to be fair, increasingly so, as to why I'm not an elite sports person. But another came last night when, if you really put yourself in the position of Karim Benzema over that penalty, like for real, not in a million would I attempt a Panenka. Just on the off chance that it goes disastrously wrong, this will be remembered forever. This will be the kind of miss that will be associated with you forever. You'll be lambasted a million different ways. So I'm hitting it pretty hard and I'm putting it in one of the corners and I'm not doing a fancy run-up. So if I miss it, it's just, oh, great save, keeper. Like the nerve, the sheer audacity to do that after, by the way, missing 4 of 9 this year, including 2 at the weekend. You've missed 2 at the weekend. I just roared out laughing.
It's so funny, yeah. And
I just couldn't believe it.
And it was the reaction inside. I was like, just outside the studio here, and I didn't see it. And I got like 2 or 3 messages from around the office that just went, like, they were just sort of varying, like, different types of laughing emojis and just the word Benzema. I didn't even know what was happening, and it was just, that's the way he is. He quoted on Spanish TV afterwards, translated obviously, "If you don't take penalties, you'll never miss them. It's confidence, nothing more. It's all mental." He also spoke about the fact that goalkeepers were starting to study, his penalties and seeing what he does. So he had to change it up, and that's just one of the different types of penalties you have to be able to take.
Wow.
Is a Panenka. He has the confidence to do it. It's all mental,
So he knew that in all the studies of Ederson and the Manchester City goalkeeping coaches fraternity, not once had they seen a Panenka.
Possibly not. Well, they definitely didn't expect it anyway.
No.
So, Benzema's, as you said, he wasn't having the greatest, run of penalties. So you just double down. That's the sign of a player who's like. It's actually amazing to me that he was missing penalties at all, given the form that he's in this season. But like the confidence of that guy at the moment, he's playing like. He's playing like he's on turbocharge in a computer game and was already the best player in the game.
Yeah.
See,
I always think with those Panenkas as well, adrenaline can do strange things and we can somehow summon superhuman efforts. So I would think the adrenaline at that moment is coursing through you. I always think it must be so easy to give it too much and to just dink it over the bar. Zidane came close with the underside of the crossbar that time. I'm amazed we haven't seen one just dink way over. A golfer who misses the green on the last 4 holes of a Sunday at a major and is like, what? I've never hit a 9-iron that far in my life. I'm amazed it hasn't happened.
I was also thinking golf, but in a different way of kind of like trying to pull back, but like the legs being a bit jelly and you're doing it way too much and just like sort of chipping it up into the air like that, like you would with an iron shot that goes 15 yards up into the air.
Yeah.
And you could easily just make yourself look even more fool. That would be even more foolish if a Panenka doesn't even reach the goal. That's I was saying. When you were saying not in a million years would I try that, I was thinking to myself, forget about Champions League semi-final and forget about the pressure of it. I don't think I'd try a Panenka in an empty goal in case I mishit it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
As 4-3 wins go at home to Real Madrid, Richie, that was a disappointing one for City.
Yeah, it was. Pep Guardiola says his players should feel upbeat about last night's results. City had a 2-goal advantage on 3 occasions before eventually beating Real by 4-3. And the City boss said they shouldn't be downcast about the meagre nature of the lead they'll take to the Bernabeu.
Nobody can say that the football game was not good because both teams want to try to play, want to try to win, and hopefully in Bernabeu we can do a good performance as well because we need it. So we know that we have to maybe rise the level or maybe play better to reach the final. But this competition demands that, And at the end, with chances we can create, we have to convert. Okay, it's not our fault. So we have to try to do it. We were really, really clear, and we didn't do it. Okay, but I want to try to convince all my players that we won the game, that they don't have to make one heads down, heads up, and know that you have to go to Bernabeu to win the game, to perform quite similar today. You have minimum chances. But even in Bernabeu, I said before, now we're 1 up, but you go 2 or 3 or 4. Always you have to perform well. They are able to score 3 goals in 10 minutes, so they have this ability. And we have quality for the history, especially for the players that they have. But in the same time, you have to try to, be ourselves, and it's a good test, a good proof for ourselves.
Yeah, Madrid's ability to just hang on the ropes and take everything you got and then counterpunch is absolutely remarkable. Interesting there, Richie, even Guardiola is acknowledging in the press conference that he found a pretty peeved off Manchester City dressing room, and his post-match talk was, this isn't terrible, this is okay. They would have known. That should have been, I would say 6-2. Yeah. That game should have been 6-2.
Well, I think I think they're probably downcast because they were probably expecting it from their manager, because you look at his reactions on the sidelines, particularly to some of the wasted chances in the first half. He will be capital FEWMIN fuming at that performance, not by the nature of how they played from whistle to whistle, but the fact that the game should have been done and dusted. The tie should have been done and dusted by half time. And you don't get a chance to waste opportunities like that against a side like Real Madrid, who might not be, peak of their powers, winning 3 Champions Leagues on the bounce anymore. But they're a team, like you mentioned, who can hang in there, have fitness levels that seem above and beyond somehow, even Manchester City's, and can have have game changers like Karim Benzema, have somebody pulling the strings in midfield like Luka Modric, and you have somebody who can run at your defence like Vinicius Jr. did last night. And I would fancy Real Madrid to get over the line in the second leg, because City really did look like their heads dropped when that third goal went in from Manchester City's point of view. Heads dropped in the sense that they didn't look like they were really morbid or mourning anything, but they were definitely leggier than I would have presumed they would be at that point in the game and at that point in the tie. And that's something certainly that Real can take advantage of.
Yeah. Cancelo back for the second leg's huge, because obviously Stones didn't work out and Fernandinho certainly didn't work out at right back despite his brilliant assist. There was a moment where you saw the great and the awful of City, and the reason maybe they haven't quite seen this tournament through just yet, when there was a cross which De Bruyne put in, an amazing cross, first time cross, flashed across the goal, and the camera cut to Guardiola, and the TV commentary said, he's applauding the De Bruyne cross, and he wasn't actually. He was turning back to Laporte and Ederson, who had played the most unbelievably brave / insane football under pressure to start the move, and he's applauding them, and you think, God, that's Man City, that's why they're amazing. But then you fast forward a few months later, and that brilliant Laporte play is there, but it's been highlighted, BT highlighted it, RT highlighted it, it just jumped out a million miles when Fernandinho dives in and Vinicius turns him. That's going to happen. It's 35-year-old Fernandinho playing right back. But when Vinicius has this straight run at goal and Laporte just keeps on running back towards his own goal, like you would think the first move there is, I have to run to cut off Vinicius's straight line to goal. I just have to do that. And instead he just keeps running towards his own goal to the point where Zinchenko, who's drifting across and picking up Benzema, almost runs into him. And he's like, you feel like Zinchenko must be thinking, what are you still doing here, as Vinicius is just going towards goal? And so, that's chronic. I thought that in a game of this calibre was actually staggering on Laporte's part. It was staggering. I couldn't understand it.
Where does that come from? Is it from Laporte's talent, or is it their coaching? Is it his bottle? Because it's such a big game that he's lost his head a little bit and he doesn't remember how to defend. Yeah,
initially I thought maybe his instincts are just that poor and he's this glorious all-round footballer who's not in that position very often because City are so dominant. And then, to be fair, Richie Sadlier made the point on RT last night that Van Dijk does this a lot too. So maybe next time we've Kenny Cunningham on or Gary Breen, maybe this is a new thought in coaching. But I don't see the sense in it. I don't agree with it. Not least when Zinchenko's behind you and literally running into you. When you've 2 men marking Benzema in the box and Vinicius goes, okay, I'll just keep going. It doesn't make sense. So, I mean, maybe the fact that Van Dijk seems to do it, I haven't noticed that as much, but that Laporte did it last night was really hard to fathom. Yeah. But that's City, like the wonderful and then the kind of head in your hands woeful moment.
Definitely, and it keeps it interesting because otherwise we'd be in trouble, because they were so good at times last night that there wasn't a team in the world that was going to stop them, and now the tie is alive. I wonder though, as downcast as they were, like to Richie's point about Madrid in the next leg, I think by the time the second leg comes around, City will have reflected on what they did well and realised that they're a good bit of a better football team than Real Madrid. And I would think that, like, if things don't get weird again, which they very well could with this Real Madrid team, let's face it has been all season. But if they don't get weird again, I think City could be comfortably going through in the next leg.
If Chelsea can go 3-0 up at the Bernabeu or 2-0 up at the Bernabeu, I have no doubt that Man City can win 4-0 at the Bernabeu. Yeah. But
what happened to Chelsea then, John?
This is the thing. There's like a weird quality about Madrid. Rich, where are you taking us next? Rugby, I think.
Yes, Six Nations CEO Ben Morrell claims offering prize money for the Women's Six Nations will be counterintuitive. Despite having a title sponsor for the first time this year with TikTok, no prize money is being awarded based on performance in the competition. Morrell says prize money would widen the sporting gap between the so-called stronger and weaker unions.
I kind of think that's fair enough point, actually. Like, at first glance, I was like, what? And then the more I think about it, like over the next 10 years, it's not even like 8 or 9 out of 10. It's like 10 out of 10. France and probably England are going to win the Six Nations. So do you really want to give them millions? Like once the money is being distributed that TikTok are paying and that's been raised and that's been distributed across the board, I do think it's slightly different to the men's Six Nations where it's so competitive and so even, and you know the prize money is a really good incentive. I'm not sure the value of giving England X number of million over Ireland and Scotland trying to develop for 8 or 9 of the next 10 years. Am I wrong?
I think it would be better for the money to go equally among the unions. If that is the case, then great. Yeah, I don't know if we need to widen the sporting gap. I think other than that, I think, you know...
Let's punish England. Every time England win it now, they should have to pay a fine. How about that?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think you might be right. I think it might be one of those things that looks a little bit worse in the headline. As if we're not paying women anything, you know, we're not, as opposed to what it's actually doing.
Well, I'm presuming the TikTok money and the money generated is going to be there then given back to the game. Like, there's no walking off pocketing it. I'm presuming. So on that basis,
the issue there is Morel's essentially admitted that the competition is a 2-horse race.
Yeah,
and I'd like to know what they're doing and what they're encouraging to happen for that gap to be closed, because the more like this tournament bizarrely has become more visible with the fewer chances there are to actually win it. Like it was still a pretty niche concern when Ireland won the Grand Slam, and yet here we are, what is it, 8 years later, and we're talking about it being a 2-horse race and being, you know, between France and England for the last decade, and it's going to continue to be that way for another decade. And something needs to be done, not only on an individual union basis, but also from Six Nations organisers to try and arrest that, because it just becomes a waste of everybody's time if that's the way it's going to continue.
Yeah, totally agree. Like, so I've obviously been very invested in this year's tournament, in particular working with Virgin on it, and therefore doing games that I mightn't necessarily watch previously, not involving Ireland. And there is no question the biggest issue in this tournament is that every single England and France game, bar the game when they play against each other in round 5, is non-essential viewing, because you already know the result. And there's no selling that to the public at large. There's no future in that. And that is the biggest issue, which has to be addressed as soon as possible, because actually the Wales-Scotland game, which went down to the final moments, was brilliant entertainment. You know, like, and that this applies to
Wales
anything.
Ireland was great for a lot of it as well.
Wales Ireland, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you'll watch 2 raindrops rolling down the window if it's close. But the one thing which is just death to sporting interest at large is uncompetitive sports. So yeah, totally agree. That is the big issue, and it's, I don't know how they fix it actually anytime soon. That's the big worry. So Rich, the clock's against us. Jerry Thornley is waiting. Any last story you want to bring us?
Yeah, we'll go to the Crucible finally. Mark Williams won 3 frames on the bounce to book his place in the World Snooker Championship semi-finals. The 3-time Crucible winner came from behind to beat Yan Bingtao 13-11. John Higgins took an 8-7 lead into the evening session of his quarter-final with Jack Lazowski, so it remains. On the other table this evening, Stuart Bingham up against Judd Trump. Trump now leads that one by 9 frames to 8. He's won the first frame of the session. The winner of that one will play Ronnie O'Sullivan in the semi-finals. O'Sullivan completed a 13-5 win over Stephen Maguire earlier on today.
Irish Gas 1883 on Twitter is telling me that Peter Crouch missed one at Panenka against Jamaica for a hat-trick in 06.
He did.
Did he?
At Old Trafford, yeah.
Keeper stood there straight into his arms type thing?
Pretty much, yeah. He just kind of looked at him and laughed, and because Crouchy was in mid-robot peak of his powers kind of phase, and he was looking to get a hat-trick before they went off to Germany and made a Hames of that. So
Crouchy taking a penalty on a hat-trick.
I think he won a 5-1.
What would Roy Keane say about that? Who's the penalty taker?
In 06?
Yeah.
I don't know. Who was the English penalty taker in 06?
Beckham?
06 would have been Beckham, yeah. He certainly took it against Argentina 4 years prior, so yeah.
I feel like, was he gone by 06?
It wasn't Crouch anyway. Can we just...
No, he's captain in 06.
Was he still hanging around 06, Beckham? Yeah, okay.
Rooney, maybe?
He was captain in 06, yeah.
Okay, well then he was taking the penalties. He wasn't knocked off them. Fellas, thank you very much. Richie, thank you.
Nice and lads.